every time. Like, why are you like?
Is this thing working? I never know if this thing's working or not. I hope you can hear me. You know what? It's been so long since I switched my computer on and actually done some streaming and some real work. I've got no idea what I'm doing. So I'm gonna apologize. And I'm also trying out Restream here to try and stream to Twitch as well as yeah, YouTube, because Eric, well, he said it'd be a good idea. So I'm going to give it a go. So anyway, welcome to the stream, and awesome. I wanted to do something a little bit different. So I haven't done a video in a while, and for that I apologize. I'm going to give you I'm going to tell you why. Give you a little bit of background. So I think, you know, as a lot of people have been kind of suffering. Oh God, I don't know how to turn that up, Ivan. A lot of people have been kind of dealing with issues around COVID, and I wouldn't say I've had issues with COVID, but I think that there's been a lot of kind of pressure. And you know, like I looked at this and I was like, hey, I've got more time than I've ever had in my entire life. Why am I not doing so much streaming and things? And well, it's just hard, right? I mean, like I have a full-time job. That's the thing that kind of pays the wages, and I work for a great company. Don't get me wrong. I work for HashiCorp, which I absolutely love as an organization. But I kind of find that recently, because of COVID, and it's probably because I haven't been able to get out and see people and about, it's just been hard. You know, so I've just been sitting down. But at the moment in the UK, the weather's good. And I'm feeling pretty good. And I'm like, you know what? I really want to get back into the streaming. So I genuinely appreciate you all for turning up to the stream today. And I just want to kind of cover some of the questions that you may have and do something a little bit ad hoc. I've got some new content, which is looking at how you can use Docker for development. And I'm going to dig into that. So please, you know, hit me up with the questions in the question thing. You know, that question thing anyway. Manuel, I haven't actually used any Rust. I did buy the book on Rust with the intention of learning it once, because I'm like, everybody says Rust's cool. I need to get on this hype train. And in the end, I was just like, Go really works for me. And I know it. And I like it. And look at me. I'm an old guy. I'm way too old to learn something new. But anyway. So let's dig in. We've got a couple of questions. I got one question on YouTube earlier on, which I'm planning on live debugging. So, well, that could go good. That could go bad. We'll kind of we'll see on that one. But there was a question about question 2. Sorry, episode 4, and the question was, why am I using new servmux here? And so ordinarily, when you're using Go and if you're kind of just hacking on adding sort of handlers and things like that, you're probably just going to do HTTP dot handle, or handle func, something like that. So the question was kind of like, why am I using new servmux? Why am I creating it explicitly? So under the hood, what, and I think I explained this in the video, but under the hood, what handle func is really just a kind of a reference to an implementation of new servmux. If I go here, you can see there we've just got default servmux. So it's literally just calling that. Now, by kind of creating it this way, I'm just being a little bit more explicit about what I'm doing. Technically, it doesn't make that much difference from Go, but it's just a standard. I just like doing it this way. I'm stuck in my ways. Let me just dig into a couple of these questions here. Plus, we got Docker is nice. Yeah, I love Docker. I've used Docker every day. I would say pretty much for about, I couldn't even tell you how long, 7 or 8 years maybe, since I was a pretty early adopter of Docker, and I've never looked back. I really love that company. Good folks. Is Go suitable for real-time data processing? You've got a limitation on memory. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say Go is heavy on memory. I think it's like everything else. If you've got to do any explicit sort of memory management, and if you need to do that, then maybe Go is not the right way to do it. But you know, you've got also the garbage collection, which you've got to be thinking about. That can also be a factor in things if you're having issues, because whilst the sort of the garbage collector in Go has got a lot better, it will pause your application as it reaps and cleans up resources from created objects. So it's I don't know if I could stick my neck out on that one. I've never tried it. I'll be 100%. I think it's a pretty sweet language. If it doesn't work, you can get on the hipster train and go on the Rust there. Probably, I'm joking. So let's have a look at another question. What we got? Any framework I've got my heart set on for Go web development? Fiber tends to echo. You know, somebody mentioned Fiber earlier on. Let me just take a quick look at this, and I'll explain. Oops, that's not Fiber. I'm trying to Google whilst 22 high fiber foods you should eat. Now, Google, I think you're. I don't think you're talking the same language as me here. Let's try this again. Fiber, Golang. There we go. Oh, and Express and right. So I started using Express.js just the other day, and I kind of dig it. But anyway, let's take a look at this. Okay. I tend not to look at benchmarks. They're not my main focus. My main focus is developer productivity. Benchmarks, unless I've got a very specific need, are kind of secondary. But it's nice that the folks have actually put some benchmarks in there, and it does seem to be fast. However, I want to kind of I want to kind of put a caveat around sort of when you're looking at benchmarks, is that benchmarks are specifically looking at a framework. They're looking at how fast can it process the requests, the handling of the things like deserialization of any request objects into JSON, etc., etc., etc. Processing of the routers and stuff like that. That is not the slowest part of your code. The slowest part of your code is where you're actually doing stuff. So if you're saving 20 nanoseconds between framework A and framework B, but your application actually takes 500 milliseconds to process, it's neither here nor there. But I have to say, and I'm not knocking Fiber, very nice that they've gone to the trouble of running those benchmarks. That means they care about performance, and that's important. So looking down there, this looks pretty neat to me. You know what we're going to do? Let me, should we try this? What do you think, chat? Should we give Fiber a go? Seems to be a lot of people like this. Harsh is like, hey, Nick loves Gorilla framework. Nick is stuck in his ways. Nick learned something 7 years or 8 years ago, you see, and he's kind of just stuck with it. The reason I like this is because it's not actually a framework. It's just a kind of, I use components. I tend to be, I quite like to kind of do the sort of the composition thing. I think depending on what you're doing, if you're just building APIs, you don't necessarily need a lot of stuff. But I think there are benefits to using frameworks. When I kind of teach things in my videos, what I really want you to be doing is I want you to understand what's going on. And I think this is really important. It doesn't matter which language that you're looking at, you've got to have kind of an underlying mechanical sympathy. That's why I started off with kind of video 1, where I was looking at the standard packages. Would anybody use those standard packages without anything else in their code? Probably not, no. The standard packages were designed for people like Gorilla and for Fiber and stuff like that to build on top of. Those are the things that you consume, but by having an understanding of how they function will make you a better programmer, because when it comes to something going wrong, if you understand the various kind of permutations that the request is going through in the code, it's going to help you get to the source quicker. Plus, sometimes it might just be fine. Hello world in 5 lines. Yeah, who doesn't want that? So we're going to give, what are we going to do? We're going to give Fiber a go. What do we reckon? Oh, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do it. Let's create a brand new project. So what we're going to call this? Okay, let me zoom that up for you as well. Oops, I can work out how I do zoom that up. Someone was asking just 2 minutes ago, I think it was Harsh, about tiling window manager. I use Windows for streaming, because I can buy a Windows machine which has got a lot more horsepower than a Mac for a lot less money, and it's actually a really good platform for doing streaming and stuff. So I use my Windows desktop here, and as a window manager, I use the Power Tools, and what Power Tools allows me to do is kind of like, you know, set my windows up and around. And let me push this over to a different view there, so you can see more of the screen. So the window manager, it's Power Tools window manager. It's pretty good. Fiber test, cd fiber test, and let's go mod it, create a new Go project, and let's open VS Code. Okay, there we go. So we've got new VS Code. We're going to do go dot, no we're not, we're going to do main.go. Shows you how long. I can't even get things the right way around. Create package main. Just doing our basic setup. Format dot print line. Hello world. All right, there we go. We got our basic application. Let's just check that runs. Go run main.go. Okay, excellent. Fiber. Sorry, let me just have a quick dive into some questions there. Solid in Go. Yeah, I mean, like literally all of the time. I think Go is really good for looking at solid principles. I mean, just by the way that the kind of the language is architected. I mean, sort of conceptually, obviously, you're dealing with duck types as opposed to object orientism, but you still have interfaces. You do things like dependency, inversion. You know, Liskov's principle works absolutely. If you've got a square, it should behave like a square. It should be completely interchangeable and things like that. So, yeah, 100% solid works with Go. I think there's a really good presentation if you Google solid and Go. I might be wrong in thinking it's Dave Cheney, but there is a really good YouTube video there. Let me grab a sip of tea. All right. I like SQLX. I think it's a pretty good frameworks for beginners. I think it's hard to say. I think choose one of the popular ones where you're going to find a lot of support articles. I would say that is that's probably the most important thing. Now then, Fiber. Let's have a look here. Oh, sorry, I just changed that view. Let me put that back. So let's have a look at a simple, must be a copy paste example. Here we go. So we're going to do fiber.new, and then we do app.get. Okay, passing in a function, which gives me a Fiber context. And I'm just returning c.send string. Okay, so that's a function on the context. We'll have a look at that in a moment. And then just app.listen. So that's just going to run my web server. Yeah, that looks pretty sane to me. This also, I think where is it? Yeah, Express inspired. I was going to say this looks very much like. Has anybody ever used Node.js and Express.js? If If you've not, then it looks kind of like this. If you have, then you'll recognize this. Where am I? So let's see if we can make this work. Out of the box, I do like a good copy pasta bit of instructions. All right, so we can do fiber.new. We're going to need to import that. And I'm going to apologize a little bit. My streaming setup might not be optimal today because it's been a little while and I need to figure out how this thing works again. I was also busy working 2 minutes ago, so I've got a load of windows open that I could probably get rid of. All right, so we're going to import that and let's do go run. That'll pull the module in. Looking good so far. I like that. There's a nice little, yeah, that's kind of nice little UX there. And let's create a new terminal. And this is running on port 3000. So we're going to do curl localhost 3000. Look at that. That's all right. So there's a pretty much nice out the box setup. So that was easy to use. I'm pretty impressed with that. We've got a little path. So do I have any suggestions on circuit breaker for libraries? Now, okay, so disclaimer. I'm currently writing a book on patterns with relation to the service mesh because I'm a personal believer that things like reliability, so things like circuit breaker retry, some of the sort of the network reliability patterns, really get them into the service mesh. So that's kind of my sort of personal stance. But if you don't have a service mesh, then you need a circuit breaker. GoKit is probably the place you should look. There is a library, I think, on the internet called Go Reliability. I could be wrong. But if you look at GoKit, Peter Borgon's GoKit, there is a bunch of really good libraries that he references within that framework, and that sort of there's definitely a circuit breaker in there. Yeah, I'm going to resume some videos, Rajesh, very soon. All right, so fiber, what's next? I'm impressed, but you're not selling it to me until I can do hello world and Go. What does zero memory allocation in fiber mean? So I don't really know. I am guessing that what they mean is that the handlers consume zero memory, and it's only each a request will increase the memory and then it goes back to zero again. I don't really know. That would be my guess. So if you start off your fiber app, and I've currently got, where is it? Wow, I'm gonna close that because, oh no, I'm not gonna close that. I'm gonna minimize that. I am going to find my fiber app. So if I run if I look at how much memory fiber is, well, I do, how much memory it's using, which will be in here. Oh, I don't have these things ready to hand. Anyway, if I did 1,000 requests, I would have exactly the same amount of memory used by the application that I did before I did the first. I guess that's what it means. So nothing consumes no memory, and but things do leak memory. Okay, where am I? Go fiber. So we've got things like a rate limiter, WebSocket support, nice. Middleware and Next, always nice. Low memory is useful. Allows you to kind of cram more things, more instances on the same footprint. And, So we got blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we can do parameters. This is nice. So this again is using the express syntax. Let me see if I can wrangle this without looking too much at the, wow, I really like that document. See if I can wrangle this without too much effort. So I'm going to do, I'm going to put a parameter in there. I'm going to call it name. And then I'm going to do send string. Let's do format.sprintf. And we're going to do it like this. So we can do that in there. And do hello. Where's the percentage button? Come on. Percentage S. Oh, hang on. Wow. Oh, I'm having a bad computer typing day. So, and we're going to get that name from the parameter. So if we do c.params, and then we're going to get that as name, which I'm guessing is a string, and it will return me a string. Yeah. Oh, and a default value as well. That's nice. This could be my new favorite framework. Whoever suggested Fiber to me, I'm digging this so far. So format.sprintf, blah, blah, blah. Let's close that bracket. And let's save that. And then let's rerun our program again. Okay, got that running. So this time I'm going to do my curl. Do curl localhost this time, and we are going to do the Sheldon dog. Hello, the Sheldon dog. There you go. Yeah, Fiber's pretty dope. I mean, from the 5 seconds that I've been looking at it. Hey, John Doe from Kazakhstan. I'm liking this. I haven't tried the FX framework from Uber, but yeah, I think we're gonna dig into that maybe a little bit. Career use. Did I have a problem focusing on studying? Oh, you don't want me to go into my academic background. I don't know. So I would say that I really didn't like education until I got to university, and I probably got into university by a little bit of luck. I would probably say more so than raw talent. But once I got to university, because of the style of education completely changed, I absolutely adored it. The sort of having the freedom to be able to kind of research something, and then to be able to kind of put that together. Yeah, I really enjoy that. I don't say I would really have a problem with it, because I genuinely enjoyed what I was doing. And I think I apply that across everything. So whether I'm working or whether I'm doing any writing or anything like that, it's I'm a bit of a nerd, so I kind of just like doing these things. All right, before we kind of spend the entire thing on Fiber, because I do want to look at some live debugging. Let's take a look at doing some. I want to see how Fiber does with JSON. So let's have a look here. Okay, serving starting files. This is nice. I wonder if this can also use the new embedding libraries, which have just shipped with Go 1.6. Send string, see next. Okay, so we've got JWT authentication as external middleware. File system support, basic auth. Fiber could be my new favorite framework. Chat. I have to say this. If I hadn't been working on Express.js just a few months back there, then probably I would have thought differently, but I kind of digged that experience. Come on, how do I do JSON? All right, that's it. Fiber, you lose. I'm going in. I'm gonna figure this out without. Let's have a look. So we've got C. What has C got? So C can do. Ooh, look at that. C.json. What does this take? Data isn't. You cannot. You've got to be joking me. Fiber. Is it really this easy? So what I'm doing here is I'm just literally poking this thing and waiting for the angry bear to growl. And Fiber has this context object which every function gets. And it appears that this context object has got a load of really incredibly useful functions. So I can do things like get the various different headers, which have already been sort of decoded into accepts. I can get the raw body, the base URL. Yeah, exactly. And if I want to send JSON, I just do JSON and then I throw it an object. So let's give this a go. So I'm going to create a struct, a strut type. What am I going to call it? I'm going to call it JSON response because I am that imaginative. Struct, and we're going to do name as a string. And technically, I don't need to add the JSON tags onto here, but you know, if folks have not seen the JSON serialization tags in Go, this is what they look like. So you add these tags, and it gives me the opportunity to rename the field. By default, it would output name as uppercase name. I like camel case, snake case for all of my JSON. So I'm going to force it to do the lowercase there. Okay, so we're going to create an object. So we're going to do JR. And we're going to do equals. Create a new JSON response. And the value of JSON response, I'm going to do name, and I'm going to do c dot params name. So I'm going to get the parameter as I was doing before. And I will tidy this up in a second. Just bear with me a second. Let's delete this. So then what we're going to do is we're going to do return c dot JSON. Oh, nice, JSONP as well. We do JR. Really? You're telling me that it's this easy, Fiber? Well, that's working so far. Who we got? You're totally right. K, Juken. Alrighty. What do we think? Wow, look at that. That just works. Very impressed. Very impressed. I think I could dig into this more and look at how you use it for kind of deserializing parameters of JSON as well. But I would imagine it's very easy, and I think I'm going to have to do a little video on Fiber where I'll spend some time digging into it a little bit more. Maybe I'll do a little compare and contrast. Rewrite one of the existing services where I've used Mux, and just so we can see the difference. Might be useful for folks. You're starting a new project, hey Mahmood, and as a newbie, you're confused whether to use microservices versus serverless. What do I think of Go Micro? I think Go Micro is great. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful framework, and I've got a lot of respect for Wasim and the team over at Micro. I think, well, I mean, Go Micro for building microservices are. So I don't think it's kind of it's kind of polarizing whether you should use microservices or serverless. I think the key thing is that they are two very, very different architectures, and you have to take a very, very different architectural approach when you're kind of building them. So serverless is very event driven. It's very asynchronous. Microservices can be asynchronous, but tendency you kind of have more synchronous calls. So you know, I will make an upstream call to get the currency for something, and you know, I expect the answers back on that real time. You know, you can do these things with serverless as well, but I would say the kind of serverless architecturally, to get the real benefits out of it and to get the benefits of scale, you've kind of got to take an async approach or an event-based approach. I've never been able to get my head around that. I like flows that I can visualize. Let me just take a sip of tea. Good tea. Tea is good. Right. What was I going to do? There was another question. Yeah, it's totally Express. How to become a senior Golang developer from Midlang? So I think the key thing about being a senior developer is not just about your knowledge of programming. I think the kind of the differentiation between sort of mid and senior is that there's a sort of architectural knowledge and sort of architectural patterns. I think there are things that you learn just by getting burned 1,000 times. There's a sort of a familiarity with bugs that you have once you've encountered them a dozen times. I mean, I kind of like debug stuff, and people are like, "How did you spot that so fast?" And I'm like, "Yeah, this is not my first rodeo. I've been stung by this bug a bunch of times." So I think there's definitely a time thing in there, but for sure, knowledge of the language and your ability to use it is a thing. Now, where I would say that kind of there's a differentiation is that you are going to start becoming the teacher, because as a senior Go developer, your real benefit is not the fact that you can program 10 times faster than anybody else. It's that you can enable everybody else to program 10 times faster as well. That you can help them out, that you can guide them, that they become you. And that I think is a real thing. So, you've got to be thinking about that. You want to be starting to look and trying to mentor people. You've got to remember that you can always help somebody else. And I think that's a key thing about learning. By trying to share what knowledge you have, regardless of whether you have a lot of knowledge or whether you're pretty new to something, you'll probably find that there's always somebody with a little bit less knowledge who will benefit from what you can teach them. So that would be my advice, Shivam. I would, keep your head down, keep looking into the sort of the programming level things and learning more. Look at other people's code, but also think about the sort of architectural patterns around what you're doing. Look at things like how do you make code not so much more efficient, but more less bug free, more sort of it does changing the structure, additional tests. And also how you can enable, others. So yeah. Really struggling about joining tables from different services, database per pattern. What are my thoughts on the best approach for this? CQRS. Yeah. So I wish I had an example of CQRS. So command query something separation. I know what it is. I can't remember what the acronym is. Let's see if we can find an interesting QRS. Martin Fowler, always the go-to in every situation, without question. Command query responsibility segregation. Okay, so the kind of conceptually with CQRS, let's think about what you're doing here. So with a traditional microservices approach, what you're going to do is you have a separate data store for each one of your services. That's what kind of gives you the independency, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have a dependency on the data which is stored in each of those databases. So for example, I might have a users microservice, which has a users table, and I might have a payments microservice and a payments table. So Nick Jackson is in the users table, and Nick's payment for whatever he's recently just bought, thinking pizza right now, is in the payments table. Now the accountancy department, what they want is they want a spreadsheet which has Nick Jackson, Nick's credit card details and his address and what he bought as a line entry. So how would you join those two pieces of information when they're in completely separate databases? So you could do a cross-database join, and it would probably work. I mean, you could write a data processing application or something which is creating a data lake. Now with CQRS, that is kind of the approach. So what you would do is you would basically extract the data from the two different data stores, and you would store it into a separate database. Now, also with CQRS, what it also gives you is, because you're kind of adding those things, you can also build up history and stuff. I'm not an expert by any shape or means, but let's see if Martin explains it a little bit better. So you can have different queries, building up processed blocks of data lakes. I think this kind of stuff works. Check out domain-driven design as well. Domain-driven design kind of runs through a lot of those approaches to be able to combine data. And yeah, if you just want to do something quick and dirty, there's no reason at all that you can't just query two databases from one connection. But I wouldn't recommend doing that live. That would definitely be for an offline process. Your microservices, keep them independent. If you've got a service which requires, you've kind of got to query both of the microservices through the microservice interface, not hitting the data stores. Data stores 100% related to the microservice itself. Yeah, I was actually thinking about this earlier on today. Sort of GORM, which is a Go object relational mapper for Golang. So if anybody's used, I'm trying to think what the Java Hibernate. Am I on the right lines with the name of that? Hibernate? I think so. And there was also one for C#, which was very similar to Hibernate. Both pretty good tools. And what they would allow you to do is you would basically define, let's say, a strut. So I think I've got a strut here, don't I? And I could do things like, I don't know, let's see, I could use a tag, and I could do database. I don't know, maybe this is username. And things like that. So by adding, I really made a typo there. By adding the kind of the tags, it gives you the ability to kind of automatically build up queries. And some people really like object mappers. Hibernate, that was the one. I'm on the fence. I find when I'm dealing with microservices, because the kind of the scope of the database is so much smaller, that it's less useful for me. I really love, when I was dealing with a monolith, and the monolith is maybe querying, well, maybe it's doing that cross join, which includes Nick's user data, his address, and his payment details. Link was that's the one, Raja. Like ORMs were really useful there, because it'll allow you to compose the query, and I'm doing all of the sort of the joins and things like that. You still have relational data in microservices, so I might have a coffee object, and a coffee has a list of ingredients, and so you can have coffees and ingredients in terms of your table. So assembling that, and GORM will allow you to do those things. But I've never got along with it. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just not for me, and I think that's the key thing. Don't sort of don't 100% sort of stand by exactly what I say. Take your own advice around that. SQLX I find is actually really a nice compromise. It gives me that kind of, it allows me to do things like the grunt work of just populating a strut from a database table without actually having to manually kind of go through and do all of the assignment. So SQLX works really, really good for me in that way, and I tend to use SQLX whenever I'm dealing with SQL databases. Gorm is a really good tool. It's incredibly popular and it's used in a lot of places. If it works for you, then you know, very, very, very happy. You've got to choose what works best for you as well. Someone early in their career is contributing to a couple of OS projects, enough to be a good developer, or is there more? So you don't have to contribute to OSS to be a good developer. I think that there's an absolute benefit into contributing to OSS, and let me try and explain where I think that comes from. One is that you're giving back to the community, and that's important. It helps you learn. Now, and that is probably the key most important. It helps you learn, and you're helping somebody else learn. So always, you know, try and give a little back from what you take. OSS projects are always looking for people to help them out, and it doesn't just have to be around sort of the programming side of things. More often than not, things like documentation is really kind of hard to keep maintained and up to date when you're working and trying to maintain an OSS project. So being able to help contribute to simple things like documentation is generally a massive bonus to the maintainers, and it will give you a lot of learning, because if you're contributing to the documentation, you're looking at the code to understand what the code is doing. So there's, you know, don't think that just because you're not writing code and you're not writing massive features that you're not helping the project and you're not helping yourself. So Harsh, I would say, you know, if you have the time, find an OSS project and do try and help out, even if it is something small like answering queries or filling in the documentation, and then slowly sort of working up. Let's have a look. Sorry, a couple of quick questions. Pure SQL is easy to write. Would love to create a schema. Yeah, you know, one of the things that I've been looking at recently, GraphQL, I'm pretty fond of. For don't know where that came from. Side note. What do we got? Are there any plans to cover building Kubernetes operators using Go in the future? Well, I mean, not actually Kubernetes operators, but just before I started the stream, if I can find the right one, what I was actually working on is a controller for Kubernetes, and it's using Kube Builder. And it's a project that I'm writing, which I'm hoping to contribute upstream to the service mesh interface. So service mesh interface, which defines an abstraction over sort of common service mesh configuration. The fact that you can have a single resource definition, which you could apply to a Consul cluster or an Istio or Linkerd or Kuma, or, you know, whatever it is you're using. The kind of, with the maintainers, so if you're maintaining controller for service mesh interface, I would say 90% of your code is exactly the same as somebody else. So the people working at Microsoft on OSM, controller logic is probably going to be exactly the same as the folks working on the HashiCorp Consul one or the Linkerd or the Istio one. So whilst we do have an SDK, which uses the old, I forget even the name of it now, the old Go, even though I created it, Go SDK. We're looking at using Kube Builder to create a more modern and more consumable way of building SMI integrations. So if anybody's interested, I could do a live stream where I'm just hacking through that. That's literally something I'm just working on, like right for the last few weeks there. What are a few things that every developer needs to learn for sure? Like design patterns or application architectures. Oh gosh. So I think design patterns are important, and I think learning design patterns are important because structuring code is really, really important for maintainability and reliability. So badly structured code is generally going to be really difficult to test. So if you find something is really difficult to test, it's probably the structure more so than anything else. The fact that you can't invert dependencies, or the fact that the sort of the composition is a little bit wonky. I can't be a little bit more specific than that without sort of showing an example, but design patterns are really important, because when you start looking at things like object conversion. Object conversion is really interesting. So you can use things like adapter patterns. Now, they're used everywhere. And being able to kind of just recognize them. Bob Martin's book is incredible. The Clean Coder is a really great book. I read it a long time ago, and regardless of what you think of Bob Martin on a political stance, that's a good book. Another book is anything by Kent Beck. So TDD by Example is a very good book, and I would say that still stands the test of time. The Gang of Four book, Patterns, Principles and Patterns. I know the book. I mean, I actually a copy of it. It's in a C# and Smalltalk book. Patterns, Principles and Patterns of Design. Gosh. Yeah. No, not that one. I'm going to have to Google Gang of Four. My word. I don't have a great memory. I can't deny it. That's the one. This book here. Design Patterns. This book is how old is this book? 1994. So that is, what year is it? My word. So that's coming up 25 years. 35. Wow, 25 years old. Wow. This is a really great book, and it stands the test of time. So, conceptually, a lot of the examples are based around C++ and Smalltalk, but like the way that the patterns are explained, they haven't really changed. And do they work with Go? Go doesn't have some of the object-oriented sort of constructs, but most of the patterns are still applicable. So I think this is design patterns, elements of reusable object-oriented software. Like, say, don't take the object-oriented software too much to heart. The patterns there, things like singletons and stuff like that, you still use in Golang. So this, I recommend this book. Would you recommend Golang for a beginner software developer, or is it better to master object-oriented programming language or learn Golang? That's a really good question. So, I mean, conceptually, Go has some object-oriented constructs. It doesn't have the sort of the really, really deep elements such as polymorphism. Really, it has inheritance and certain elements of abstraction, but not to the sort of the extent of something like Java or C# has. I think when I look at code today, as opposed to the code that I was writing 20 years ago, I would say that 20 years ago, I needed object-orientism. And the reason that I needed object-orientism was because I was dealing with much larger applications. Now, when I have much larger applications, I've got different layers of code reuse. Now, with microservices, I don't sort of have that level. I don't often feel that I really miss out on things like polymorphism. Occasionally I do in Go, but there's generally a kind of a way around it in one way or another. But yeah, it's I think Go's fine. I mean, I think there's definitely going to be a tendency for languages to become simpler because the surface area of the code that we are writing is smaller. And I think that's an important thing. Object-orientism was a specific design to cater for large and increasingly growing code bases. We're trying to kind of go the other way on that. So I think it's fine to learn as a beginner. How do I mock dependencies in Go? For example, system sockets, file system access. Oh yeah, honestly, Victor, like one of the things I love so much in Go. I think I'm probably doing that. Let me see if I've got some code here. I'm sure I've got some code here. I'll show you an example. have to open up another. All right. I've probably got some code in other places, but I know what's going on in this repo. So let me open up this, and I'll show you the way that I do it. So let me open up, find the right file that I want. Providers and a container. Okay. So what this block of code does is it's from an application which Eric Veld and I wrote called Shipyard, and Shipyard is a tool to kind of manage well, modern cloud native development environments. It allows you to kind of bootstrap yourself a dev Kubernetes cluster or another application for your when you're working deving. Just spin things up and spin them down, and you can define resources. So you have things like creating containers in Docker and Kubernetes clusters and stuff like that. So what this block of code does is this block of code creates a Docker container. So again, what this is based on is it's based on an interface, and we have an interface which is provider. I don't want to get into that. So when I create a container, I have a bunch of stuff that I need. So for example, I need to be able to do things like, well, pull Docker images, and I need to do things like create Docker containers. There's create networks. All of that is kind of goes into what this resource has to do. So how do I unit test that? So if I unit tested create as a function here, and I was using concrete dependencies, then okay, I'm going to go into internal create. Just go into there. So I'm going to do build container. So if I've defined that, so if I wanted to unit test this code, then this is actually executing a concrete implementation which builds a Docker container. And that's going to be pretty slow depending on what the Docker container is that I want to build. And ultimately, I might not have written build container. So, well, if I didn't write build container, then why am I testing it? I'm assuming that the person who wrote build container is testing it. So what I want to be able to do is not depend on a concrete implementation, but depend on an interface. And that's exactly what I do here. So when I create my container, I'm injecting in my dependencies. So I'm injecting in an instance of container task. But look at this. Container task is not the concrete implementation. I'm injecting in an interface. And I'm injecting an HTTP client to be able to do things like health checks. But again, an interface. And a logger, well, I'm injecting in the logger as well as an interface. This is config, so that's the concrete implementation of that strut. So if you look at the test for that, and if I can find it, here we go. So what I'm doing is when I'm creating my new container, rather than injecting those concrete dependencies, I'm creating mocks for each of those things. And that way I can actually unit test the logic. So the things that I'm interested in is if the config element of build has been called, am I calling build container? That's the code that I wrote. That's what I want to test. So by using sort of mocks in this way and injecting the mocks, I can do that. So that's kind of like how I go about it. Let me see if I can show you a little bit more of a concrete example, maybe using our fiber example here. So let's say in fiber, let's say we need to call a database. So if we need to call a database, I'm going to have my data package, and I'm going to create a new file, and this is going to be my psql.go. Okay, so package data and type pSQL, pSQL strut. And I've spelled that wrong. I'll come back and change that in a second. And then we're gonna have a method on pSQL, which is get data. So this is mock. I'm writing pseudocode here, right? This is mock code. So I'm gonna do func, adding a method on here, pSQL, if you're Sean Connery. Sorry, I apologize. And we're gonna get data. Data is just going to return interface because I can't be bothered to define a structure. But that doesn't matter. So this is a concrete implementation, and well, this is I'm gonna make this break. So, but you can imagine this is actually going to be calling my database. So in my code, in kind of here. Well, what I kind of want to be able to do is I want to be able to inject those dependencies. Now, if I write the code like this, it's going to be really hard for me to for me to kind of test this sort of stuff. But I mean, for example, let's say we're going to do get the data. And we're going to do data. We're going to create our data object somewhere here. Don't write code like this. I'm cutting corners. That's just to show you how to replace on a dependency. Bar db is going to be data dot pSQL, something like that. What did I call it? SQL. Okay. So in here, sorry, my bad. Correct that. Concrete implementation is going to be equals data. Sorry, reference. It's going to be data dot pSQL, right, like that. So we're instantiating our data thingy, and then we're going to use it here. So we're going to do db dot data. We're going to get the data. Get the data, put it into dev null for the purpose of a demonstration. Now, the thing is that if this was a real data element, if this was a real connection to a Postgre database, unless I've got that database running, I can't run this function. If I write a unit test around this, I have to have the database running. And that's going to be very slow. It's also going to be very slow, but it's also going to cause me a lot of problems because you've got to think about initial conditions. So when I run a unit test, I want to be able to run a unit test every single time from exactly the same starting point, because in order for me to get that sort of predictable behavior. If I'm running a database and I'm mutating the data inside the database, every time I run that unit test, I don't have those exact same initial conditions. So it doesn't quite work, right? And ultimately, I'm testing the database client. There's a place to do that, and it's not here. So what I can do is I would generally depend here on an interface. So instead of defining data pSQL as a kind of a concrete implementation, well, what I would do is I would have an interface, and I will call my interface type interface, and I'm going to call type database, and it's going to be type interface, and on database there's going to be a single function called data, which returns just an interface. So now we've got this interface data. So rather than declaring and utilizing the concrete type, what I'm doing is I'm utilizing the interface. So I'm depending on interfaces. This is solid principles, right? So now what do we got here? data.psql SQL. It's complaining about nothing. But so pSQL can be assigned, this concrete implementation can be assigned to this because the PSQL strut implements this interface. And again, I'm depending on the interface. So it kind of allows me to do things like testing. All right. So here I'm still calling db.data. That's still the same method. But what I can also do is I can do things like create a mock. So I could have type mock SQL, and that's type struct. And again, you know, I can got to implement the interface method there. And I could do something here. Maybe I'm just going to do calls plus. So yeah, I don't know, anything. It doesn't matter. But and then, oops, oh my word. Thinking and talking at the same time is not my strong point. I normally just talk without thinking. I find it easier. But anyway, so now I could use this mock SQL, and it's completely interchangeable with my data object. So it allows me to do that substitution, which makes my tests a lot faster. The library that I really like in Go for mocking dependencies is Testify. And I've used this package by Matt Ryer, the excellent Matt Ryer, all my Go career. It was one of the first packages that I started to use because I was kind of I was just getting used to kind of writing sort of a lot of testing. And I'm like, well, I'm doing this in C# and I'm using like, what's it called? C# unit, similar to JUnit and stuff like that. So I was looking for a library which gave me that similar thing. And also that kind of like assertion concept, because I'd be doing a bit of Ruby. And I really liked the approach of Testify with its assertions and with its mocking library. There's other tools are available. There's Mockery. There's some really great sort of libraries, but I like this one. And I use this pretty much in every project that I use, I would say. We have a little question there. Could I recommend some resource for writing low-level code in Go, for creating raw network packets or some low-level I/O? I'm not really sure I've done anything like that, Gurav. I think I do apologize if I pronounce your name wrong there as well. So if you do you mean actually just how do you write like bytes to a TCP socket or something along those lines? Because you can actually do that with NetTCP. NetTCP will allow you to create NetIO, the net library will allow you to create TCP and UDP sockets. Socket. There we net. How do we get Go documentation? Gets so confusing. Everything changes. I don't like change. I'm too old to remember stuff like this. Peter, wanna throw me a bone? All right. So the net library is about as low as it's kind of like you can get. So you can do things like netdial and create a TCP socket there, listening at this address with this port. Create a socket here, listening on all IP addresses using this port, and then you can accept connections, and if you want to write to it, you can just write sort of streams of bytes and things like that. That's about as low as I've ever programmed in Go. I've done quite a bit with NetTCP. It's an experience. It's not that bad, really. It isn't. All kind of network programming like this is so much more challenging than dealing with sort of layer 7 application protocols. Hey, I just spotted Rosemary Wang in chat there, and hey, shout out to Berry. Lovely to see you. You should totally be following Berry and Rob and all those good figs. Oh, and Jason O'Donnell, look at that, all those HashiCorp lovely folks. What we got? Question. In HashiCorp, Consul agents serve as refusing remote access with dev mode on Windows WSL. How do I enable remote access? I'm going to really apologize about pronouncing your name. Bayer is about as close as I'm getting. I'm so sorry. I'm genuinely embarrassed at being able to do that, but I'd rather not try and get it horribly wrong. My money would be on the fact that when you're running Consul agent in dev mode, it's binding it automatically binds only to localhost. So what you need to do is you need to set the bind address. I don't know if I've got it. I think I've got Consul agent running here. Consul agent, Consul. Well, I can just run a Consul server. So Consul agent dev, right? So we got Consul running there. Let me just grab another terminal so I can zoom that up. I can work out which buttons I need to press. So if I curl localhost 8500 v1 status leader. Okay, you can see there that we're getting 127 blah 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 blah. So that's the leader of this. Now, if I go over in PowerShell, so I need to get the IP address of this VM IF. I've got no bloody idea what it is in there. So we've got this IP here, which I think is reachable. Just zoom that up. Ping. Let's give that a go. Okay. Well, this might work. V1 status leader. This is going to fail, and I can tell you that because it's only listening on localhost on the other one. So yeah, so it's not even it's not responding there, right? So what you do is, let's have a look at this. And if we go over here and we do Consul agent, let's look at the help. I think it's bind. I could be wrong. Dash bind. Hello, Jason. Yeah, we love a bit of Consul. We were just talking about Vault earlier on. Jason works on Vault, specifically looking at like things like the amazing Kubernetes integration with Vault. And someone was asking, can we show an example of how to do microservice integration with Vault? And DevOps Rob is going to be down on digging into that. I swear he is. We'll force him to do it. Yeah, so it's bind. Let's have a look at that. So we can change this, and we're going to do bind, and we're going to bind to, or we're going to try and bind to all IPs, and it's probably going to complain at me. Yeah, because I've got multiple IP addresses. Must be late. So let's just bind specifically to what I hope is the correct IP address. Seems to be working. Let's run that again. I don't actually know if this is accessible from the machine. I don't actually know what the IP addresses are. Oh, so it's the client address. So you see there, the client address is still listening on localhost. Let's have a look. You know, Barry should be like helping me out here by grokking through those docs, but she just likes to make me suffer and watch me suffer there. There we go. Sorry. There we go. This is the one. Client. This is the client bind. It's for the API. And then we're going to set that to this IP address. Let's have a look. Okay, that says that's worked there. Might work. There you go. It's all working. So buyer, that's what you want to be doing. You want to look at the client address, and actually, I'm pretty sure you can set this to all IP addresses on the machine by doing that there. So there you go. It will also accept. It'll bind to all IPs for the client address. This is fine for doing this in development, but from a sort of a security hardening perspective, you should always sort of try and restrict the access that things like the APIs have. But there you go, buyer. Just your last question. When setting API gateway-based authentication service, is a secure service-to-service call with a token between internal services, or just secure it by network? So I would say never trust the network for your only source of security, because if you can do things like restricting routing. So for example, if service A and service B, they only communicate. So you can do things by configuring the routing tables that the IP address of service A is only allowed to talk to service B. If I know what those IP addresses are, I do IP masquerading, and I can get around that sort of routing table, because I'm just tricking the router. What you need to do is, in my humble opinion, take a twofold approach. So you want to kind of look at using something like TLS to be able to kind of just encrypt the transport. I would recommend, if you're going to be using Consul, just to switch Consul Connect on and actually use MTLS between the two machines. So then you're using the certificates as a method of identification. And that might be enough for you, actually. So I think, do you need a token as well? Maybe. I think tokens are really good for like role-based access and things like that. But I think for network access, if that's your predominant concern, look at things like mutual TLS and leverage something like Consul Connect Service Mesh to just take that headache away from you. Tech teacher, could I help review a personal project? Hey, if you wouldn't mind me doing that on stream, I'd be happy to do that maybe next time. If you want to kind of fire me over a link. So I do, just before I go, I want to look at an example that somebody sent me earlier on, and I promised that I would go through this, and they're having a big problem when facing the running program, unable to decode. So it's saying blah blah blah. The output message gets as, okay, so it's blank. Without looking at this, I'm going to put money on this, that this is JSON serialization without passing a reference and actually a copy, but I might be wrong about that. That's my hunch. Can I clone this? Clone it. See. Can I download it? Oh, come on, GitHub. You're making me look stupid. It's not hard, I admit. Let me clone this, and let's see what we can find out. There's a lot of common problems that you kind of you might find, and I must admit, I don't. Sometimes my examples, I'm not going to be 100% clear. It's really difficult to kind of know what somebody else doesn't know and what I do know. So, okay, DIR. I can only apologize if anybody struggles with things like that. Okay, and git clone. Okay, here we go. And let's just open up this in VS Code. What's happened to me in the last 8 months? I think probably I've just genuinely been just burned. It's the whole COVID thing has just been a pain in the butt, and so literally not been able to go anywhere. I haven't left this house or this area in 12 months now. The furthest I've been is like 2 miles down the road in my car to go to the supermarket to buy the weekly shopping. And that's the only time I go out during the week other than walk my dog. It drives you mental. I mean, literally drives you nuts after a while. And I think it when it comes like that, you need a lot of clarity to sit down and try and work on sort of projects. Otherwise, I'm just not going to be doing a good job. And I'm not going to be explaining things clearly to you. And, you know, it's sort of, that's kind of, I suppose, the sort of the predominant reasons. I just haven't been able to really concentrate, so I didn't feel like I'd be doing things justice. Oh, Harsh, you're like trying to teach me stuff, and I'm stuck in my ways, buddy. You can't teach an old dog. Honest. Avi, would I say Windows dev environment is as good as native Linux for Go development? Yeah, I mean, it's pretty good. I use WSL2 and Ubuntu for on top of Windows, and I'm pretty cool with it. I mean, I've got VS Code here running natively on Windows, and I'm running all my code here and all my Go in WSL, which is on Linux and Unix, whatever's. And it works really well for me. I'm going to be honest that it's not without its quirks, but for me, there's kind of a couple of key things that I really I find really useful. As part of my job, I do a lot of sort of video work. Having a workstation where I can do a lot of video encoding is really important. And video encoding, you need like it's predominantly GPU driven. Otherwise, you spend an age and a day working for things to encode. And Windows is just great for that. Also using things like, I use Adobe Premiere a lot. I use Photoshop quite a bit. So being able to run those natively on a single platform without having to jump between multiple computers, I just find like really, really useful. And in terms of cost, like for the bang for your buck, like I have a Windows desktop here, and okay, it's a pretty reasonably decent one. Like the Ryzen 9 3950X and like 32 meg of RAM, and not a massively new graphics card. I've got a Vega 64, which is 8 gig of RAM. It's a few years old graphics card, but it works really good. Yeah, Daniel, I apologize. I don't know what's going on with the volume. I can't turn it up any higher. It's something has gone wrong somewhere in my setup, and I can only apologize to you about that. Yeah. So anyway, let's dig into this request. So what do we got? Episode 4. And we're on, I think, let's just go back a page. Unable to decode the JSON to the project object. All right, let's have a look. So we'll run the code. Okay, so that's in Go setup here. Don't see there's a Go mod file there. I know Go shifted to a bunch of different stuff for sorry, wait with me 1 second. Sorry, I was just looking at the audio there. I genuinely can't fix it right now, so I apologize, Daniel. Go went non-Go pathless. I like Go path, so I'm stuck in my ways with that. But let's take a look at this code. So we've got main.go. Everything is in there. Okay, so it all looks pretty okay. Self-contained. I would recommend not doing stuff like this in in Go. It's not a criticism on the code in the slightest. Yeah, I've got no idea even. It's actually the stream volume going into my OBS is very low, but it's loud going out of my mixer. Bear with me. You're going to force me to fix this, aren't you? Right at the end of the stream. Well, that made it go. Made it all look quiet. My word. Can't hear it. Okay. So we got makeup gain, we got compressor. Don't believe I'm pulling the volume down anywhere. But it is very quiet going out of the of my mixer there. Turning that up does nothing but deafen me. I'm going to have to apologize and try and fix this for next time. I don't. There's a way I can pull the gain up here. A couple of notches. 3, maybe 4. I don't know. I can only try and sort of pull the gain up a little bit there, and I'll fix this for next time. I apologize. It's been the second and third sliders. These are all the input levels, which is all up max. I'm not actually using the chat channel right now. We'll fix that another time. I apologize. So, like where we're at. So I was saying, I recommend always using Go paths and using the sort of the convention. But you know, don't worry. I'm not here to make comments on stuff like that. So I'm just going to create a Go mod for this project. And what we can do is we can just replace this here with Go mod. So we're going to get the right approach, and it's data. It's episode 4. /data. Right. I'm just going to check this other code here. Handlers. Again, let's just use the sort of the qualified package references. And I think there might have been one more handler. No, that one looks okay. Products, that looks okay. Let's try and run the code now. So go run. All right, so we're running. So let's have a look. Let's quickly dive back, see what we're saying. So we passed. Let's copy exactly the output. The output message you got was as follows. All right. So let's have a look at this. What I would do is, first thing, I'm just going to go over, and I'm struggling to find the right window. And let me just switch that view. Not that view. To that view. Let's paste that command in there. John, I've been a long fan of Gorilla, but we've been looking at the Fiber framework today, and I have to say, I really like it. It's my new favorite, maybe. So we did that. We put, and now let's. Output message I got was okay. Oh, right. in here. So name T, description, relaxing T. Well, isn't that just? It works perfectly fine for me. Vipul, I apologize, buddy, but I've just ran your code and it worked. It worked first time. You don't have any problems there. What I'll do is I'll create a PR, but literally all I did for you was just change the paths from a relative path to an absolute path, and then added the Go mod in there. So that was, I apologize, chat. I think we were looking for a juicy problem to solve there, and we didn't have a problem to solve at all, because Vipul has done a great job on his own. And I'll reply to you later on, but you know, thank you very much, I suppose I have to say first, for kind of looking through the videos and following through that stuff. My code compiles and I have absolutely no why. You know what? That is literally 99% of my daily existence. I get to the point that I'm more worried when my code works than I am when it doesn't. I think that's just years of suspicion of writing bugs. How do you think in microservices? I think you're asking Mailbase. Oh, that's a really difficult question. So I think organizational structure is a big deal around that. I think sort of composition is very subjective. A lot of people will build very, very, very granular microservices. Some people will build more microservices. There's kind of a current common conception that microservices should have a single responsibility, and I think that's a good aim to have. But you know, at the same time, having sort of conceptual things like a payment service, a currency service, users service, which kind of maybe maintains user addresses and things like that, you can break things down a little bit further. You can do things like having an avatar service or a user image service and sort of stuff like that. I think you've just got to kind of find something that works for you. I think when things are too granular, it can cause you more harm than if they're too broad. So it's a difficult one. I think you just practice, and if it feels too big, cut it down. If it feels too small, merge them. That's a nice thing. You don't have to keep them the same. Frameworks. Yeah, I think we've all been really impressed with Fiber tonight on chat, and it's a kind of sorry, I was trying to find the link. An Express.js like or inspired. Not that one. I've got too many windows open and I've got no idea how to use a computer. Go Fiber, but we created this little example and just ran through it live. I've screwed it up because of course, but yeah, I'm impressed. Event sourcing should be implemented over Kafka or gRPC. So I mean, Kafka is a data store. gRPC is a transport. There's the kind of the difference there. You could use Kafka and gRPC. I think when people are using event sourcing, they generally turn to something like Kafka because of its ability to just deliver incredible load and skill. Incredible load and performance around large projects and large throughputs. I've also looked at Kafka, and I do know that it is complicated administratively, as you would expect from any large kind of piece of complicated distributed infrastructure. So you don't necessarily have to use Kafka. There are other sources available. I mean, if you're running in things like AWS, you can use AWS is SNS and SQS queues, so they're simple queuing service and simple notification services. If you're running in GCP, you can use Google's PubSub. If you're running in Azure have, I forget the name of the Azure Queues system. So all of the clouds have their own managed services, and it'll just take the headache away of maintaining them. And there's also a bunch of kind of smaller sort of open source tools, which are incredibly powerful to use. How does Amazon handle? Oh gosh, I have no idea. The way that Amazon works is literal magic to me, and I think I would probably have a brain explosion if I actually knew the technical complexities of what they're doing. The engineering is incredible with all of those clouds. So they can do it. So I think you know nobody's infallible, but Amazon as are all of the clouds, are so used to dealing with peak demand. It's their core business, and in the same way as a lot of organizations make a lot of money around those peak areas, so does Amazon. You know, people are buying more servers, they're using more, consuming more. You're scaling up all of your e-commerce. They've got that down to a T. I think you can pretty much 100% trust any of the cloud providers to kind of know what they're doing and to be able to just handle a load, and that's a nice thing. What's the first point of contact? I mean, it's generally on a case by case, but you know, if you're consuming services from a cloud provider, they're going to give you support. Depending on how much you spend, obviously you'll get different levels of support, like the way the world works, but they'll give you support. Microservices and Node. Node's cool. I've been working with Node recently, Paolo, and I'm pleasantly impressed. It was very, very comfortable and pleasant experience working with Node.js. Would I switch full time? I would have to learn stuff. gRPC and GraphQL, two different things. So again, you know, GraphQL is a kind of is a querying language for kind of allowing you to select the data that you return. So if you think about the way that a web service works, and you've got let's say I've got a product service, and the product returns me 20 different attributes. If my front end only uses 3 of them, and I'm transferring a lot of these, then I'm wasting a lot of transport by sending too much data. Now with GraphQL, what I can do is I can basically say, only give me the 3 attributes that I'm interested in. Now that doesn't necessarily save you on the back end processing, because you're still kind of going to be potentially retrieving those from the database. Maybe you can select the fields. I don't know the exact composition, but you're only sending the data that you need. Now, GraphQL, I believe, was predominantly kind of, when it was initially conceptualized, was around sort of looking at the problems with mobile connections. Mobile connections, which have to make a lot of round trips, can be very difficult. Like handshakes and things like that on a mobile connection, that chattiness can actually slow down things a lot. With GraphQL, it allows you to aggregate in a single request, as well as tailor the amount of data that you want. And it's actually just very pleasant to consume a GraphQL API. Check out GitHub's API is all GraphQL based, and there's like GraphQL. This whole conference is around now, but I'm a fan of GraphQL. gRPC, I mean, you're looking at like a sort of a transport between 2 applications. I would generally use GraphQL as an interface to the end consumer. So for example, my Edge API, which is going to communicate with a web UI, or maybe a mobile phone application, or something along those lines, I think GraphQL is really good for. Public APIs, public facing, service to service. gRPC, which is a kind of a binary protocol, which is based over HTTP2. It gives you, it's very efficient, because you're cutting down the amount of data transferred because of the binary protocol, as opposed to a pure text-based protocol like JSON. Very, very fast. But also the kind of the throughput and the concept of using the kind of the protobufs to kind of generate a lot of code for you. I use gRPC a lot as well, so I'm a big fan of both those technologies. Favorites cocktail recipes. I would probably say anything with tequila in it, probably a margarita. it would have to be a margarita. I mean, I'd be letting the team down if I didn't say margarita. Anything with the old Spanish wine, I'm a big fan. Biggest difference between Gorilla and Fiber. I mean, I think so from an evolutionary sort of perspective, you've got to look at the Gorilla existed even before Node. So Fiber's sort of inspired by Express.js. It does a lot more for you. I would say there's a lot more utility in it. I mean, the example we were looking at earlier, some of the things, just writing JSON and having that single function or in context, it's actually really nice. Some of those helper functions without being too hefty. gRPC is great backward compatibility for a binary protocol. I mean, it's probably about the best there is. The way that you can kind of deprecate the fact that it's a binary protocol, but you don't necessarily need to specify all of the attributes. So you can have different versions of contract, and for it still to function is a really important thing. Not a lot of binary protocols will let you do that. If you've worked with any RPC in the Java days or in any Corba back in the old kind of C#, and the interface was so tight that both ends had to be upgraded at the same time. That was a living hell. Why would people want to use an Express framework? So, I mean, let me just pull up this code here. So this, you know, I was really impressed with just kind of playing around with this little Fiber. Let me just clean it up. This little Fiber app here, and I'm going to do a video on this. I'm inspired, but so you've got that Express syntax. So you have app.get. So you're defining a get-based endpoint, and then you can specify the path, and then also specifying the parameters, and it's using that same sort of Express.js format. And then what you do is you define the function that's going to be called, and the function takes a single parameter, which is this Fiber context. So for here, what I'm doing is I'm creating my JSON response, JR, as in the real JR from Dallas, JR Ewing, and that's probably lost on 99% of all of the audience, and for that I apologize. But sorry, I'm going to stop on the Dallas bad jokes. But so then what you can do is, rather than kind of doing the whole JSON on Marshall, so let's look at how you would write this if you were writing that with pure Golang. You're going to have something like this, right? So I'm going to do HTTP, and I'm going to do handle func, and I'm going to say that slash, and I'm going to do my handler. So it's going to be a function. If I can type, this might take a while. Bear with me. The response writer we're going to use to write back out. That's an interface. HTTP dot response writer, and then we're going to do the request, which is reference. So HTTP dot request. And we're going to do something. We're going to do something like that, right? So in here, this is whoops. Let's close that. In here, this is where we're going to write the meat of our function. Let me just throw this in as a comment so that it quits complaining at me, if I can manage it, which is not entirely certain I can. Okay, so we're going to do all of that, right? So we're assuming that we want to be able to get this parameter. So I mean, just basically, Matlock. There was some good TV. That was pretty terrible, actually. We've got a lot to thank Netflix for. So how do I get this parameter out of the URI? I mean, actually, in raw Go, this is a total pain in the posterior. So what I have to do is I've got to get the kind of the URL from the query string. So I'm going to do something like r dot path. I'm sure I can get URL dot. My mouse is in the way. So I can get the path. And now to be able to get a parameter that might be passed with that path and stored into an ID, then I've got to parse it. So, well, in this instance, it's pretty straightforward. I can just strip the front slash off, and I can assume that everything is following it. But you know, what if I've got a path like this, which is app slash param slash children slash something else. That, if you've got to parse that, and I want to get sort of this parameter and that parameter out of this string, yeah, I mean, okay, I can do a split on it, and then I can, I know that the second index position is going to be this one, and then it's going to be that. Do you really want to write that code? I don't want to write that code. But so having this kind of express syntax here, and just being able to define these parameters in your URLs, and for those to be immediately populated in this context.params, I like that a lot. Gorilla will do something similar, yeah, but you know, this is just kind of bashing raw standard library here. So we've got that, and then what's the next thing we want to do? Well, we want to return some JSON. So let's say we've got our JSON response here, and I want to return JSON inside of the standard library. You know, let's write this code. Do name. So it's going to be, let's just do this hacky strings dot split URL. I am not expecting this code to work, and I'm not writing this defensively either. I'm writing this in the most crashy way that I possibly can. But I think something like that would work. We'll find out. Sorry, that's strings. Anyway, so then we want to return the object. So let's construct our response. So JR queuing is JSON response, and we're going to do the name. Wow, it's late. I apologize. And then what we're going to do is we need to send that. We need to encode it into JSON, and we need to dump that out. So how do we do it? Well, the most efficient way to do it is to use a JSON decoder. So I'm going to do JSON dot new encoder. I'm going to specify the writer. Now I can use the response writer because that implements Go's writer interface. And then I can do encode JR. So, you know, I mean, okay, you've got this and you've got that. There's not that much difference, but you shouldn't sort of take lightly the readability of having an explicit statement like this. I mean, sure, I can read what this is doing because I've done it 1,000 times, but somebody new is looking at your code. They've got to look up, well, what does this new encoder thing do? That's a bit of a weird thing. So I'm going to Google that. And then I'm like, oh, okay, so there's an encode method on this object, blah, 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 blah. This is just totally explicit. I mean, I would actually I would never kind of do this. I would always recommend putting this into a sort of a helper function or something, but it doesn't matter too much. So let's see if this code runs. Why you no run computer? Oh, well, yeah, of course. So HTTP, thanks for like not pointing out my mistake there, chat. HTTP listen and serve. And we're going to use the default mux, so nil. It's thinking. I think that might be working. I'll be amazed. Oh, well, it worked. Like, I mean, I can pebcack my way through code, but I mean, let's look at this. All right, I'm not going to pass that in there. What happens if I do that? What happens if I do that and then that and then maybe it's not as horrible as I thought, but you know, it's as an approach. This is so much nicer. This is like the simplest example that I could come up with, and it probably doesn't illustrate as well as it could. But seriously, don't take lightly nice functions like this that allow you to kind of just extract parameters. So simple fact as well, actually, here is that I'm not limiting the fact that this is a GET request only by doing that there. So in here, we have to have another line. We've got to say if r dot, where it is, method equals http dot get. It's not equal to method get. Then I'm going to bounce the request. So I'm just going to do turn http dot error. I know you've got an HTTP error, computer, RW, the error string, meh, and http dot 404. Status not found, of course. Just going through here, just doing that, like that. All right, there we go. So you kind of end up, I'm writing a lot of boilerplate, and I still haven't really got to the level of what's going on in here. So, I mean, looking at this sort of compositionally as well, we were kind of chatting earlier about testing, but think about this. Look at how much extra code I've got here. If you're writing this handler, you need to test that. That is like absolutely important. No, you can't return errors in that function. I was hoping that I could just do a single line where I was going to call the method and return, but I was just pebcacking. The important thing is that if I don't put the return there, well, I'm going to return this HTTP error, but then the code's going to continue to progress. So I actually have to have a unit test around that block of code now. And I wouldn't recommend anybody writes this. It works in very, very simple examples, but for production code, the fact that I don't need to do any testing around this because it's tested inside the individual library, that's a very, very useful thing. There's a bunch of stuff that I haven't written defensively around here. So what if response writer doesn't exist? Well, this code's going to blow up. It shouldn't, but it could. It might have been closed earlier on in a different block or something. What if JR can't be encoded? Then shouldn't I return a sort of an error message to the customer and say, like bad request or something like that? All of those things. So I think using a framework like Gorilla is my kind of, or was my go-to, but I'm genuinely going to be spending a little bit of time with Fiber because the structure really appeals to me. I find this, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily write stuff like this. The way that I would do it is, I would do it like this. So I'd have, let's see if I can just copy past a bunch of this. And then there's the middleware as well. So there's a lot of nice looking middleware for Fiber, things to be able to do like JWT validation for your kind of your base level role-based access and stuff like that. So I'll need to give it a name, don't I? Should I call it get handler? Because I'm that imaginative. There we go. This is how I would do it, and I'd most definitely put this into a separate library because I like to unit test handlers, and we're going to come on to that in some of the Go microservices stuff in a little bit of while. But there's I apologize Twitch because I think there's been a bunch of questions that I've not been seeing here. So if I have missed some questions, I do apologize. But look, I hope this little stream has been useful for you all. I apologize it went on for about an hour longer than I originally intended, but fortunately when I start talking I have a real hard time shutting up. But I say I do hope it's been useful. And if it is if this kind of thing is useful, maybe where we kind of just go on a a little bit of an ad hoc exploration of some content. Maybe again, looking at something like Fiber, or if you've got a particular thing that you would like me to work through and maybe give you some pointers on an actual example, then I'm more than happy to do that as a kind of ad hoc streams. They don't take a lot of preparation, which is a good thing, because I'm time poor and money poor. I'm money poor and time poor. How does that work out? Shouldn't it be one or the other? Shouldn't you be like time rich and money poor, or money poor and time? Anyway. And I will fix the audio for next time. I say I have no idea what's going on with my stream here, but thank you all so much for watching, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. But until then, catch you later.